we're gonna do is, in the morning, I'm gonna bore you with me talking. You're gonna get all bored, and you're gonna withstand me painting some demonstrations. Then it's gonna be time for you to work, and I'm gonna go around the class and look at everybody's individual projects, and we're gonna be talking. And on purpose, this is something that not a lot of teachers do, but I prefer to do. When I talk to you individually, I'm gonna speak loudly. And I hope that you do as well. Because when you ask a question, you can be certain that at least one or two more people have that same question. So don't feel like you need to whisper, Ken, I don't understand this and this, can you explain to me? Not in my class. In my class it's, Ken, why is this? Why is that? Speak so that everybody else can benefit from what you are trying to learn. What I've come to understand is that in painting, we all go through the same struggles. So if somebody is dealing with a challenge, it's very likely that whatever I have to say to alleviate that struggle is going to be productive and beneficial to other people too. My philosophy on painting and the way I approach painting is different from perhaps what a lot of other teachers think and do. So some stuff that I'm going to say is not going to intuitively make sense. It might not totally fall in line with things that you may have heard in the past. And that's okay, because there's not one right way to paint. I don't presume that my way is any more correct than anybody else's. It's just what I've learned, what I've grown up with, what I've learned how to do. And so what I recommend is, for the purposes of making the most out of this workshop, just take whatever I have to give, and then if it doesn't come together with everything that you like to do or everything you already learned, just put it aside. After the workshop, you can say, okay, well, I learned how Ken does it. He has his own way. That was interesting. We learned that way. And then maybe you choose to incorporate some of it into your practice. Some of it maybe doesn't work. But in order to make sure that you learn as much as you can out of these sessions, try not to reconcile what I'm about to say with the stuff you already know. Try to take what you already know, put it in a box, close that box until Saturday. Then later you open all the skills you already have, they're yours, you've earned them. Okay, I can't erase them and I'm not gonna try to, but just for the purpose of this classroom, if I say something weird, roll with me. Try it. If it's really weird, that's fine, we're gonna have fun. And very importantly, what I want us to prioritize together is the learning process. The learning process. A lot of people, when they come to study painting, there's some conflict because on the one hand, they want to learn new skills. And on the other hand, they want to make pretty pictures. And these two things don't live together well. Why? Because when we want to make something pretty to put on a wall, we have to use the skills we already have, because that's all we know in order to create something pretty. If I'm giving you some new techniques that you are unfamiliar with, it's very likely that when you first start out with them, it's not going to come out pretty. It's going to come out a little awkward, because everything that's new starts off feeling a little bit awkward. That's okay. Let's embrace the awkward. If it comes out ugly, that's fine. If it comes out unfinished, that's fine. If it comes out really different from what you consider to be your style, that's also fine. If at the end of the process, you look at a work and it's not your best work, but you say, this is new. My work has never looked this way before. That's what I want. That's what we're going for. It means that you came out of here with new ideas, new techniques, and new possibilities. And then maybe you want to adopt 33% of it, 75% of it. That's going to be up to you. I want to leave this workshop with giving you as many tools as I can, so that later you can decide what goes in and out of the work. But let's not bring into this particular classroom the desire to make something that we can scan and put on our website. It's gonna hold us back. Let's come into this workshop with the mentality of, let's learn, grow, and improve as painters, even if later it doesn't totally fit our personality. But that's what I suggest. First of all, it's important to understand that painting is both a verb and a noun, right? Painting is an object, but painting is also an action, right? So I'm not talking about the noun in this case. Let's talk about the verb.
Good.
I would say that painting, in all its forms, what it is an organization of shapes and colors on a surface. The craft itself is we take something two-dimensional and we arrange on it stuff. This stuff, in the way that we arrange it, we put the colors together, could come out to be a dog, could come out to be a rabbit, could come out to be a person, could be totally abstract. But no matter what the image is, the action is an organizational action. That's what we do. If something is wrong with the shoulder of the model, and I tell you, the shoulder is incorrect, it needs to come lower. What you're doing is, you're not moving a shoulder. We aren't plastic surgeons. There's no figure on that actual surface. What you're doing is, you're moving a shape around, right? If I tell you to bring down the shoulder, what I'm telling you is, here's a shape that's too big or too small. That shape needs to expand or get smaller. All these adjustments that we make in the course of our work, it's an adjustment of I'm arranging shapes differently. I'm arranging colors differently. Everything we do happens on a flat surface with things that, whether or not they look like people or they look like chairs or they look like bread, at the end of the day, they only look that way, but they aren't that thing. And it's our job to do and to focus on the organization such that the visual impact that we're trying to convey is received by the observer. But we mustn't believe that we are taking part in like looking at the magic and believing, oh, when I move the nose, I'm like moving that harms us because we feel like there's a person there that we're starting to identify with. And when we move the nose, it hurts us. Or when we move the eye, it feels painful. It's like, oh, I don't want to, like, this is going to be, it's the eye, moving the eye is really difficult. It's not an eye. It's not an eye. These are just shapes, okay? The painting is an organization of shapes and colors on the surface. No matter what you want to do with it, what you want to do with it is your business, right? So the organization is what is going to become the message that you're talking about. The information. The information is a result of the organization.
Secondary.
Yes, that's it. I'm trying to take us to the ground at rock bottom. What is paint, right? And like we would expect from doctors, right? If something's wrong with the hand, you don't want them to put a Band-Aid, right? We want to X-ray, look at it, look as deep as you can to discover what the problem is. If you have problems with your paintings, first go bedrock. Forget message, things, information. What is it about the shapes? What is it about the colors that isn't working? If something is not working, we diagnose it from the bottom. From the bottom. We're going to speak about it like mechanics. Right? If something is not working, I want to hear the description, not in terms of information, not in terms of description, but in terms of actionable items. Like saying something's wrong with the foot is not specific enough. We're going to have a hard time. If you say something is wrong with the foot and you think you've expressed an actionable item that you can later follow up on, you don't have enough information. We need to go one step lower. The shape that represents the leg is too large. The shape that represents the leg is on the wrong angle. The color that represents the leg is too dark, is too light. I want to talk in the ground level when we are making adjustments. What is paint? It's just glue with pigment. That's it. It's glue and pigment. I don't want any romantic ideas. That's what we are. Painters are so full of romantic ideas, and romantic ideas are confusing. They're very confusing, and they activate the ego in ways that are counterproductive. We all know the feeling of walking around a museum and seeing something from afar and say, wow, what's that? What does it mean, the combination of two words, wow, comma, what's that? Question mark. How can it be that we're amazed by something before we know what it is? And then we come closer and discover that it's a rabbit, or it's a landscape. Well, what? There's 17 paintings around the room. One calls to us from afar. We don't know what it is. We're magnetized. We come close, it's a portrait. We come close, it's an apple. But from afar, it was, quote, wow, comma, what's that? How can you explain that? A good painting is a painting in which the organization of shapes and colors is expressive. Before we know what it describes, the organization of how the colors are placed in the frame, the lights, the darks, high chroma, low color, how it's organized. Before it describes a fish or a mountain, the organization of the shapes and the colors is expressive. So, emotional resonance, colors, and shapes. I like it. So, painting is organization of shapes and color on a surface. A good painting is when that organization is expressive. Expressive or successful, evocative, choose whatever word you want. Right? Now, I would suggest to you, I would offer that later when you come closer and you see what it is, you could have the experience up close that it's either meeting your expectations or disappointing you. Right? You could like it from afar, come close, and then, it's not as good as I thought. Or, not so, bummer. I thought it was going to be better. And I think at this point, we are talking at the level that maybe most painters are more familiar with. Like, for example, are the proportions correct? Right? Does the figure look right? Or is it a little awkward? Is something wrong with the face? All these things that we can look up close could defy our original infatuation with the painting if we discover that it doesn't actually do what the larger arrangement does. Right? So we have the large arrangement of the design that could or should be the first step towards a good painting. And then how it's done in terms of like the technique needs to just meet some threshold of quality. Right? And my thesis for you is that in most academic institutions or most people who teach art today deal with that second part, the technique, the anatomy, the bones, the perspective should be correct, right? And when you come up close, you're impressed if it's done well, very impressed sometimes, extremely impressed if it's very well done. But the step before, does it hit you emotionally? That doesn't come from the impressive qualities. It's a separate thing, right? If it hits you emotionally from a distance, calls you to come closer, that part of the design, as you called it, which I love, we have to prioritize. Because without it, we can come up with a painting that's extremely impressive, but has no emotional impact. Even worse, it could be an impressive painting that's ugly. It's possible. There's a lot of very impressive paintings that are ugly, right? What I am going to hopefully do with you during this workshop is prioritize this first step, right? Technique you can always build up, but I feel like in today's landscape, this fixation on design is missing. So that means that I'm going to be encouraging you to make work that isn't necessarily focused on the impressive parts of the technique. The impressive parts of the technique, all of you in 5 years, if you apply yourselves and buy all the anatomy books, you're all going to be able to do it. Not a lot of secrets there. But the world of design is full of secrets. And it is the window to making your pieces emotionally attractive. And dare I say, beautiful. Beauty does not come from something impressive. Beauty is a result of design and harmony. We're in the mindset of just painting or drawing triangles. These triangles right now have pretty much the same emotional impact. Triangles floating in space doesn't really say much. However, if we compare the emotional impact of this frame to the emotional impact of this frame to the emotional impact of this frame to the emotional impact of this frame. This does not erase very well. Suddenly, I think, all these things feel very different. How can we have feelings for triangles? It doesn't make any sense. This is just, it's the same triangle, but it feels different. This feels claustrophobic. It's closing in on that triangle, a lot of tension. This feels like, the triangle is like looking up, uplifting. This, feels cinematic. You could even have the frame here, right? And that's even more like a movie, action, right? This, you feel like you're using how do you call it? Like a
telescope.
Telescope. You're looking at something very closely, right? We can evoke emotion just by organizing something so simple as a triangle in a frame. But the kind of frame we choose matters a huge amount, right? So if this is true for a triangle, then it's true for every shape that's more complicated than the triangle. And at the end of the day, what we need to understand is the emotional resonance is not just of this shape, it's this shape, how it relates to this shape, right? How it relates to this shape, and how it relates to this shape, or all the other shapes. There is no shape that is empty. Because what are we doing? What is painting? It's an organization of shapes within a frame. So every shape that we did not populate doesn't become a non-shape. It's just a big shape of less contrasting real estate, right? If we have background, that's a shape. That's a gray shape. That gray shape is going to have an emotional impact, depending on how that shape looks like, right? This shape, this background shape, is not in any way less important than this shape in this context if we are trying to create a design. If the triangle could evoke emotion, then this triangle could also evoke emotion. And how we crop them together matters. This is something that we need to think about before we start working. What am I trying to do here? What am I trying to do here? We look at the opportunities presented to us in the visual field. We see what shapes present themselves, and then we take the responsibility to say, oh, okay, I see the shapes. We have a light shape here, we have a dark shape there, then a very small dark shape, then a very small, very light shape. They are organized like this. I need a frame that looks like that in order to, and that's where you come in. That's where you come in. Everybody has a personal way of doing it. That when we approach our design, we don't obey nature. Nature is just a set of opportunities. It's a set of opportunities for us to cultivate emotionally resonant designs. We take what we need, right? My motive is to create this design, so everything I find in nature that contradicts my motive, I should question. If my original intent was to make all of this very dark, and that's how I initially saw it, but then I look at it a second day and suddenly I see all this information there, remember the motive. Don't get swept by what nature presents you. Remember your pictorial vision. What picture am I trying to make? Right? What is my motive? Why am I here? To rub burnt wood on processed wood. Crazy. crazy thing. You need to have a motive that is not documentary. It's not, I want to explain to the people later that there was a model sitting on a chair. Great. That's a sentence. We can just accept, there was a model sitting on a chair. Nice. We've done that with words. What I want to capture when I'm standing there with these strange materials and this strange way of spending my time, I want a motive that has a purpose creatively. Design, composition, purpose, specificity. That's what I mean. So when I say motive, that's what I'm going to mean, because I'm going to use this word a lot. Okay? Shapes that are playing a role here. And these shapes, if they don't look like a person at the beginning, even better. Even better. Try to squint at the model until you don't really see a person anymore. You just see a collection of shapes that have different values, light, dark. Right? So one very important shape that I'm seeing looks something like that. Then another shape, dark shape, looks like this. Another dark shape, looks like this. Not a person, but starting to look interesting. Should be interesting before it's a person. Otherwise, the idea is not great. Right? So now that I have this, I can start to question, okay, so how does it look in a frame? What kind of frame do I need for this idea? Maybe. Maybe like this. Not a person. Not a person. But the organization, light shape, populating a frame, dark shape. More dark over here. Interesting. Create some kind of design arrangement. On top of a design arrangement, you can always later add the information. The information can be put onto the design, but the design can't be put on the information. Right? So I'm going to try to create a frame that looks like the frame that I found compelling. So, something like this. Then I can hold this viewfinder in front of me and try to divide this frame into the main shapes that I'm seeing. So, shape of the background over here, very beautiful shape. Keep it simple. Keep it simple. Keep it basic. Keep it design-based. This shape. Looking at this shape. How does it look in the viewfinder? I want to design this shape. Needs to be beautiful. This is not just, oh, whatever I had. No. This shape needs to be an interesting shape. Every shape matters. Right? So that shape. Then what do I have on the other side? I have a shape that looks like this. Broadly. And of course, this can later be adjusted, corrected, improved upon. It's just a sketch. But this sketch helps us understand what we're trying to do. Like, for example, right now I'm discovering that the frame I drew here is a little wide for me. I don't want it that wide. Like so. And I see, okay, let's See what's going on here. If I make that shape a darker value, as it should be. Not a person, but nice shape here. Nice shape here. Now let's take the shapes that are inside. What do we do about them? We're using this newsprint because it's cheap, quick to erase, easy to apply. Pencil is too slow for this. I can't do this with pencil because moving it around, adjusting it just takes forever. Charcoal is our friend in this instance because it does it quickly. And I can very quickly do divide this shape into the dark and the light. Carve it away. This will help us discover what are the errors, what are the inaccuracies. Does this need to be shorter? Put the shapes down like you are mapping out, like you're creating a map. Don't express anatomy, just test design. What's the shape of the light here? How does it go? Does it work before it's a person? Does it work before it's a person? The organization of light and shadow in the frame. I look at this, I wish this was larger, but I respond to my visual stimulus. I see, I apply. I don't think. Thought is just going to slow me down. I see and I apply. I'm going to use this other eraser just because my frame's so tiny. This is actually, I think, probably too small to do what I'm trying to do. But bear with me. Background. Dark accent. This and this. Interesting relationship. Right? That shadow, the hair. This shadow, not as dark. Interesting bounce. Right? How are we organizing this stuff in a frame? We can then take our eraser and assert some changes to play with it until the design is compelling. What's the shape of the light? This cuts like that. This cuts like that. Over here, light moment. Rhythmic. Right? I'm thinking, how am I organizing all these shapes? Later, on this, I can then measure, how is this? Where is that? Where is the shoulder? Where is the neck? Where is the chin? All that stuff can build on the design. Now, if you don't have your painting surface, that's okay. What I would expect you to do at this point, once you have your design, and this can take you can try as many designs as you want, right? Other people will teach you almost as well as I will, or better, how to draw shoulders. But I want you to take this opportunity to try different designs. You take, if you don't have your painting surface at this point, you can do a drawing that is more polished, more specific on the paper, and then tomorrow we can transfer it to your canvas if you didn't bring your canvas today. If you didn't bring your canvas today and your canvas is white, I would strongly suggest to stain it to some kind of middle value.
Tone it.
Tone it.
With gray or
brown. Gray is problematic. Why? Because gray has white in it, and white dries slowly. You're going to put a gray on it today, tomorrow you're going to have a wet canvas. What pigments dry fast? Umber, terraverting, these kinds of earthy pigments. They dry fast. Raw umber, easy choice. Raw umber solvent, come tomorrow. If you didn't bring it today, come tomorrow with something that is not white. Okay? It's gonna make sense later. So now I'm going to use my viewfinder in order to see how much more I need to change my surface. But since I'm an obsessive person and I wouldn't want it to be too high, I'm actually going to do the sympathetically crazy thing of putting half amount on both directions. like that. And I'm going to bring this down a little bit. So now I have a format. I can check it with my viewfinder that it's pretty much what I had in mind. And now I look at my idea. I remember the motive. My motive is here in front of me. This is what I'm going for. All right. Now, with my motive at my side, I'm just going to do the same thing. Only this time, I'm not going to put any values in, and I'm going to be a little slower, a little more considered. I'm going to think, how far from the edge of this frame do we meet the side of the face? What kind of shape is this going to create? Where does this cut? How much space do I have here? What kind of angle do I have here? And the idea is this. You can't put the correct line on the very first try. Only very, very genius people can do that. I cannot. But what I can do is know that I'm about to get it wrong and commit to fixing it if I discover that it's wrong. That's the best I can do. So right now, I'm charting it without any thought of anatomy. I'm just a designer. Just a designer. And I'm looking for these shapes and how they populate my frame. This is just going to tell me if some lines line up in a way that I should care about. And they do. For example, this, which I've already put this line here, lines up beautifully with the back of the head. That is something that enhances my motive. When I discover this is what we call a pictorial opportunity. When you look at all these masterpieces on the wall, you're going to find these lines that continue through objects all the time. And the magic of this pictorial opportunity is that it's only true from this angle. If I stand here, I probably have different pictorial opportunities. If I stand here, I probably have different pictorial opportunities. But all of them are the same model, in the same light, in the same day, in the same time. But the visual relationship of the shapes is different. So as painters, we have to be aware when something like this is presenting itself to us. That's an opportunity. So we need to harness it and take it. So you can use the skewer to discover these opportunities. For example, we have a nice line coming from here all the way to where this shadow is going to start. We're going to try to keep that opportunity. And we are just looking for, and when we're hunting for these things, we are improving the chances, not that it's going to look impressive, but that it's going to look beautiful. That the eye is going to have nice channels through which to travel across the design. When you have this kind of line that continues from this side to the next, when you have this kind of line that continues the shape of the shadow that's going to be created here, the eye is going to travel across those lines. And what you as painters want to do, you want to create enough of these interesting movements throughout your piece that the eye just gets trapped. Traveling through these axes. That's why when we go to a museum and we can't stop looking at something, your eye goes here, goes there, goes here, goes where, goes here. That's design, pictorial opportunities. And at this point, I would like you to search for them, and whenever you find one, rejoice. This is more happiness than successfully capturing a nose, because a nose can be captured from every angle, but these opportunities are from this spot. This is not in the model. It's in your creative idea. Maybe somebody else would find another line to focus on. That's where creativity comes in. Okay, so we're going to find some more of these. And notice how I'm using straight lines. I don't want any curves. Curves are too fancy. I'm just trying to keep it very simple, like a builder. Testing, interesting pictorial opportunities, finding these lines. This lines up nicely with this. This lines up nicely with that. this, that, and that. What a beautiful rectangle we have here. Ah, beautiful shapes. That's what we fall in love with. Beautiful shapes, not ideas. Right? Here we have a little triangle that later goes up into this neck. And what I really like about working with charcoal on these kinds of surfaces is your pinky is just an eraser. You rub it on the eraser, and it's ready to go. And you can use it to cut these shapes into pieces. To adjust the light. I start by measuring the largest shapes, and the largest distances, the largest angles, and once I consider them to be working, once I have my big shapes, which I don't yet, and I consider them to be working and solid and compelling and visually attractive, I can choose to take any one of those large shapes and break them into several shapes. That is the process of adding resolution or detail. But when you do that while not losing the motive. If you put too much detail into the light's going to turn into a midtone. If you put too much detail into the dark, how do you put detail into the dark? By adding light moments. How do you put details into the light? By adding dark moments. And then the contrast comes close to the middle, and the motive disappears. Don't add information for your ego to show that you could see it all. We know you can. It's okay. All of us can. All this information is there. But does the painting demand it? That's the question. Okay? We as people have the ability to look at shapes, random shapes, and just how to say it? Embed them with meaning that they don't have in of themselves. You look at a cloud, oh, it looks like a horse, and you can't stop looking at the horse. It's just a cloud. There is no horse there. But our brains are constantly looking for patterns, right? So if you find a shape that you can almost call by a different name, not torso, but parallelogram, right? Not shoulder, but butterfly. This kind of stuff activates the brain because you look at that shape and your brain is doing ta-ta-ta-ta-ta-ta-ta-ta, like going to all these different possibilities. You can't look away from it. But at the same time, a higher level of your brain is saying, person on chair. What are you talking about? This mystery of the story of the shapes themselves. Underneath the story of the narrative, right? Person. These are two layers. It's like lyrics and chords. Chords underneath can say something totally different from the words of the song. You can take the same words of the song and give it to 9 different composers to give me different chords, right? You compose one song, you compose a different song. Heavy metal, jazz, rock, anything you want, and the story is still gonna be model on a chair. That's your lyrics. But I care about the chords, right? So when you find interest in the shapes, that's good enough for me. Right? We have dark shape inside of light and light shape inside of dark. I call this yin and yang. This means I can play to accentuate this epic, timeless idea that always looks harmonious, always looks in balance. If I'm a mature painter, this would mean if I really want to play up this idea, it would mean I probably should give up some information here and here. Because the more information I put in these eyes, the more my visual idea is weaker, right? If this was not the idea, of course, other portraits may be focusing exactly on the eye is the idea. But in this case, the way we choose to, I hate this word, render the eyes has to be a result of what serves my visual idea, my design concept. And so I'm not prescribing this design concept. This is just a suggestion. But when you look at life, try not to see a face. Try to see do these shapes, when they come together, create some interesting arrangement that turns you on? That's what we're looking for. Okay? I have a riddle for you. Let's say something about the model in the position that she took is slightly different between pose to pose. What is the right way to approach these changes? Think before you answer. $10 points are on the line.
Maybe trying to see geometric figures, I don't know.
Elimination?
Say more. How do I deal with it? It's different than what I have on my paper. What do I do? What do I think? How do I decide what to do?
Imagination?
No.
As
I give up. Try to understand the logic in your design.
Thank you! 10 points!
Oh.
If the change is better for my design, I change it. If it's worse for my design, I hope next time she'll take the previous one. That's how every session presents slightly different opportunities, and you only pursue them if it's like, oh, they brought this item to the supermarket, I better get it now, it might not be here next time. But you don't make that change if it's just there and you blindly follow it. You make a change if it's better for your design. If it's not better, you leave it. Fernando wins 10 points.
Campaign.
Oh yeah, for me music is so important because all these different creative endeavors have different properties and they can learn from each other. In music, it's very easy to understand the difference between the harmony, the chords, and the lyrics. In art, it's much more tricky. So music learns from art, art learns from music. Dance is also very important for painters to consider because what we're doing when we paint, which is, as we all know, organizing shapes and colors on a two-dimensional surface, we are also recording the movement of our hand in paint. If the movement was a dance that we appreciate, the painting is going to be fun to look at. Just like imagine a dancer dipping their leg in ink and dancing across a stage. Each dancer is going to produce a very, very different pattern on the stage, right? So this is something that we want to be mindful of when we're going to talk about mark making. You want to make sure that the marks you're making are fun to look at.
Okay.
The movement of your hand is going to be such an important part of your style eventually. So right now it's a little early to think about it. Another riddle. When we work with charcoal on paper, what are the different properties that we can hope to express? We already discussed shape is one of them. There are two more.
The shapes?
Shapes is one.
Color.
The shadows, the value of...
Well, value is the second one.
Contrast?
Color.
Contrast is part of values.
Okay.
If I'm expressing dark versus light, that's value. The third property that we can express
Forms.
Which are?
Bordes,
Edges.
edges.
Thank you. Edges.
Soft edges on a hard edge.
Thank you.
Edges.
Once edges,
Value.
edges. If you can come for a second here, I just want to show you something very quick. This you don't want to do before your design starts to be solid. 3 properties: shapes, values, edges. That's all we can do with charcoal, pencil, any dry media. That's all we got. Everything from the most sophisticated portrait to the most simple abstract design or most complex abstract design is made of shapes, values, and edges. When we do this process, we need to think about them in the hierarchy of importance. Shapes comes first. Okay? Once the shapes look okay, we test them with the values. Once the values and the shapes both work pretty well, we can start to think maybe our design can benefit from some variation in edges. So for example, where does this come into play on my drawing here? There's a very, very interesting edge relationship that you can look at between this shape
Like an S.
and this shape. Right now, all the edges are the same, right? But when I look at it at life, I see that these edges are soft. And this edge is hard. And that is what's going to make this look round. And this is going to look like a cast shadow coming from the head. So, not now, but just put it in the back of your brain that once you get your shapes and your values to start working, the brain is going to come up and say, is it time for details yet? And you're going to say, no, it's time for edges. These big masses, the connection, the relationship between them, we see the same thing happening here, right? This edge is soft, and this edge is sharper. That is going to start to suggest a different relationship of the form. See what I mean? Not the details. The details are not going to do it. They could do other things, but they're not going to do that. Right? So when you are looking for the next level, after you have your shapes and values, you always think about edges. And then the funny thing is, once you start working on the edges, which means some areas become softer and some areas become sharper, you're going to lose some definition of your shapes. So it's a circle. Shapes, values, edges, shapes, values, edges, shapes, values, edges, until it's like, it looks good. That's it. For this stage, we don't need any details. You go in circles. If you've done everything you could do with the edges, you step back. And your question should be, what shapes need to be better? If the answer is, they're all fine, we move on. We move on to paint. Okay?
Okay.
That's it.